Right now, as you lie here in this quiet moment, something extraordinary is happening. Something so constant, so reliable, that you've probably never stopped to truly notice it. Your body presses gently against your bed. Your head sinks into your pillow. Your arms rest naturally at your sides. This is not an accident. This is not a chance. You are being held. Right now. This very second. By the most patient, most faithful companion you've ever had. A companion that has never left your side, not even for a heartbeat, since the moment you were born. Its name is gravity. Gravity wraps around you like an invisible blanket. It cradles every cell in your body, every drop of blood, every breath you take. When you were a baby learning to walk, gravity was there, teaching you balance through gentle tumbles. When you jump, gravity catches you with soft, predictable arms. When you pour water, gravity guides each drop exactly where it needs to go. But what exactly is this mysterious force? Imagine the Earth beneath you as a giant ball, spinning slowly through the darkness of space. Now imagine that this ball has a secret power. It reaches out with invisible hands, pulling everything toward its heart. These hands are not rough or demanding. They are gentle, constant, and impossibly patient. Every rock, every tree, every butterfly, every cloud in the sky feels these same invisible hands. The rain falls because gravity calls it home. The rivers flow because gravity shows them the way downhill. Your feet stay planted on the ground because gravity whispers, "Stay with me." This pull, this gentle tug, comes from something called mass. The Earth is incredibly massive. Not just heavy, but filled with so much matter that it creates a dent in the very fabric of space around it. Think of a bowling ball placed in the center of a stretched rubber sheet. The ball creates a dip, a valley in the sheet. Now roll a marble across that sheet. What happens? The marble curves toward the bowling ball, following the slope created by its weight. This is how gravity works, but instead of a rubber sheet, it's space itself that bends. Your body naturally follows this curve, this invisible slide that pulls you toward the Earth's center. But gravity is not just the Earth's gift to you. It exists everywhere in the universe. The moon pulls on you too, though much more softly than Earth. When the ocean tides rise and fall, that's the moon's gravity having a gentle conversation with Earth's waters. The sun, 93 million miles away, holds our entire planet in its gravitational embrace, keeping us dancing in a perfect circle around its warm light. Even you have gravity. Yes, you. Right now, your body is pulling on everything around you with its own invisible force. Your pillow is attracted to you. Your blanket wants to stay close. The attraction is tiny, much too small to feel, but it's real. Every atom in your body is having a quiet gravitational conversation with every atom around it. This is the poetry of physics. You are not separate from the universe. You are part of its gentle dance, connected to every star, every planet, every grain of sand on every distant shore. Gravity is the invisible thread that weaves it all together. Scientists measure gravity's strength on Earth as 9.8 meters per second squared. That sounds complicated, but it simply means that if you dropped a feather and a hammer in a place with no air, they would both fall at exactly the same speed, getting faster by 9.8 meters per second with every second that passes. Gravity doesn't care if something is light or heavy. It treats everything with the same gentle, constant pull. This faithful force has been with you through every moment of your life. When you learned to ride a bicycle, gravity helped you understand balance. When you felt tears roll down your cheeks, gravity guided them on their path. When you've watched leaves fall in autumn, you've witnessed millions of tiny gravity stories, each leaf following its own curved path to the ground. Gravity even affects the way your body works inside. Your heart pumps blood upward against gravity's pull to reach your brain. Your bones grow strong because gravity gives them something to push against. Your inner ear contains tiny crystals that shift with gravity's pull, helping you know which way is up and which way is down, even in complete darkness. But tonight, as you rest here in comfort and safety, let yourself imagine something impossible. Something that could never really happen, but makes for the most fascinating dream. What if gravity simply stopped? What if this ancient force, this reliable companion that has held you every second of your life, decided to take a rest? What if the invisible hands that cradle you so gently suddenly let go? The question itself seems almost magical. Like asking what would happen if the color blue forgot how to be blue, or if time decided to flow backward for a day. Yet this impossible thought opens a door to understanding just how extraordinary our ordinary world really is. By imagining a world without gravity, we begin to see the quiet miracle that surrounds us every moment. Your coffee mug sits safely on your nightstand because gravity keeps it there. Your hair falls naturally around your face because gravity gently combs it downward. The very air you breathe stays close to Earth because gravity holds our atmosphere like a protective blanket around our planet. All of this happens so smoothly, so naturally, that it feels like the most normal thing in the world. But normal, you're about to discover, is actually the most amazing magic of all. Close your eyes now, and feel gravity's gentle embrace holding you safe. Feel how your body settles deeper into comfort, pulled by this invisible force that connects you to everything in the universe. Tomorrow morning, when you wake up and your feet touch the floor, you'll be greeting an old friend who never left your side. But for now, let yourself wonder, what would your morning coffee do if it suddenly found itself free from gravity's gentle rule? Picture tomorrow morning. You wake up gently, stretch your arms, and pad barefoot to the kitchen. The familiar ritual begins. Water in the kettle. Coffee grounds in the filter. The sweet anticipation of that first warm sip. But today is different. Today, gravity has decided to take a vacation. You lift your coffee mug, expecting its comfortable weight in your hands. Instead, it feels strangely light, almost eager to escape your fingers. You set it on the counter, but it doesn't stay put. The mug hovers there, floating just above the surface like a ceramic hummingbird. The coffee itself becomes pure magic. As you pour, the dark liquid doesn't fall into your cup. Instead, it flows outward in a perfect, shimmering sphere. The coffee hangs in the air like a liquid planet, spinning slowly, catching the morning light. Steam rises from all directions, creating tiny clouds that drift and dance around your floating breakfast. Each drop that might have splashed is now a perfect bead, a tiny world unto itself. Some are no bigger than dewdrops. Others grow to the size of marbles, wobbling gently as they float through your kitchen space. Your morning coffee has become a constellation, dozens of liquid stars suspended in the air around you. You reach out to touch one of these floating spheres. The coffee wraps around your finger like warm silk, clinging to your skin instead of dripping away. Surface tension, the same force that lets insects walk on water, becomes the new ruler of liquids. Without gravity to pull everything downward, surface tension draws each droplet into the most efficient shape possible, a perfect sphere. This is real physics, not magic, though it feels magical enough. In space, astronauts experience this wonder every day. They drink from floating bubbles of water, watch their tears form perfect spheres around their eyes, and learn to move through a world where up and down become meaningless concepts. Their morning coffee truly does float in glowing orbs, just as you're imagining now. But your weightless kitchen holds more surprises. The sugar you usually stir into your coffee now forms tiny crystal galaxies, each grain floating independently. When you try to mix them together, they don't sink and dissolve. Instead, they bounce gently off the coffee sphere, creating a slow-motion dance of sweetness around your floating morning brew. Your spoon becomes a swimming tool rather than a stirring tool. You can push through the liquid coffee sphere like a tiny submarine, watching the surface ripple and reshape around the metal. The coffee follows the spoon's movement, stretching like taffy, then snapping back into spherical perfection when you pull away. The cream or milk you might add creates the most beautiful show of all. As it touches the coffee sphere, it doesn't simply pour and mix. Instead, it creates swirling marble patterns throughout the entire floating mass. Without gravity to make heavy and light liquids separate, the cream and coffee can dance together in ways impossible on Earth. Spirals of white and brown twist through the sphere like tiny galaxies being born. Your kitchen transforms into something from a dream. Cabinet doors that you left slightly open now swing freely, floating at whatever angle you last touched them. The salt and pepper shakers hover near the stove. Your dish towel drifts past the window like a gentle ghost. But the most wonderful change is in you. Without gravity's constant pull, your body begins to remember what it felt like before you learned to walk. You can push gently off the floor and glide across the room. Your hair floats around your face like an underwater mermaid's. Every movement becomes graceful, deliberate, like a slow-motion ballet. You discover that turning is tricky without gravity's help. On Earth, you take for granted how weight shifts from foot to foot as you walk. Now, spinning in place requires pushing off walls or furniture. You become a swimmer in an ocean of air, learning new ways to navigate through three-dimensional space. The coffee sphere follows you as you move, responding to the tiny air currents your body creates. It wobbles and dances, always maintaining that perfect spherical shape, like a loyal pet made of warm liquid and morning comfort. But physics whispers other secrets about this weightless world. The coffee stays warm longer because heat rises only when gravity creates the up and down. In weightless space, heat spreads evenly in all directions. Your floating coffee sphere becomes a perfect little furnace, glowing with even temperature throughout. The steam from your coffee no longer rises in predictable columns. Instead, it spreads outward like a gentle explosion of water vapor, creating humidity clouds that drift and merge with other vapors in your kitchen. The air itself becomes softer, more like breathing in a gentle mist. You realize that drinking your floating coffee presents an interesting challenge. You can't simply tip a cup to your lips. Instead, you must carefully approach the sphere, letting it touch your mouth like a liquid kiss. The coffee flows onto your tongue through surface tension, warm and rich and somehow more present than coffee has ever tasted before. Each sip changes the shape of the sphere slightly. What started as a perfect ball becomes more like a floating apple shape, then reshapes itself back to roundness as you pull away. The coffee seems alive, responsive, almost conscious of your presence. Your kitchen has become a laboratory where the ordinary rules no longer apply. Crumbs from your toast float like tiny asteroids. The butter you might spread becomes a golden, floating sculpture. Even your breath creates visible currents in the air, tiny hurricanes that push and pull at all the floating objects around you. Time seems to slow down in this weightless morning. Every movement requires thought, intention, grace. You cannot rush or be careless, because without gravity to anchor you, every action has gentle consequences that ripple through your floating world. The sunlight streaming through your window illuminates this impossible scene like a spotlight on the most beautiful stage ever created. Dust motes that usually fall slowly to the ground now hang suspended like stars, each one caught in the light, creating a soft galaxy right there in your kitchen. As you float there, sipping coffee from the air itself, you begin to wonder about the other mysteries this weightless world might hold. What happens to the tears of joy or wonder when they cannot fall from your eyes? Take a deep breath in this weightless morning. Feel the air move slowly into your lungs. Now breathe out, gently, and watch what happens. Your exhale becomes visible magic. The tiny particles of moisture in your breath, invisible on Earth, now create delicate clouds that drift away from your mouth like miniature weather systems. Each breath out pushes against the floating dust around you, sending thousands of microscopic dancers spinning through the air in graceful spirals. Every speck of dust that once settled quietly on your furniture has awakened. These tiny fragments of skin, pollen, fabric, and outdoor earth that normally fall to the ground now float freely through your space like the smallest astronauts in the universe. They catch rides on the gentle air currents you create with every movement, every breath, every soft whisper. The sunlight streaming through your window transforms these dust particles into something magical. Each microscopic piece becomes a glowing star, visible in the golden beams. What you're seeing is called Brownian motion, named after a scientist who noticed how tiny particles jiggle and dance even in still water. Now, without gravity's downward pull, this dance becomes a three-dimensional ballet performed by billions of dancers smaller than the period at the end of this sentence. Your living space has become an ocean of air where everything floats and flows. The dust doesn't just drift randomly. It follows invisible currents created by temperature differences, air pressure changes, and the gentle movements of your body. Warm air from your heating vents creates thermal columns that carry dust upward and outward. Cool air near your windows creates gentle whirlpools that spin the particles in slow, hypnotic circles. You are no longer just an observer in this space. You are a weather system. When you move your arm, you push air in front of you and pull it behind you, creating pressure waves that travel through the room like ripples on a pond. Dust particles ride these invisible waves, clustering and separating in patterns as complex and beautiful as flocks of starlings in flight. Your hair, now floating freely around your face, becomes a gentle fan that stirs the air with every turn of your head. Each strand moves independently, creating tiny air currents that send dust particles spiraling away in delicate trails. You are conducting an orchestra of movement that extends far beyond your body. But the most incredible dancers are the smallest ones. Individual molecules of air, normally too tiny to see or feel, now play a more noticeable role in your weightless world. Without gravity to settle everything downward, the natural jiggling motion of air molecules becomes more apparent. They bump into dust particles from all directions equally, creating a gentle, constant motion that scientists call thermal energy. At room temperature, air molecules zoom around at about 1,000 miles per hour. You can't see them, but their invisible dance keeps every floating particle in gentle, constant motion. It's like having billions of microscopic bumper cars creating a soft chaos that never stops. The pollen grains that drift in through your open window become tiny yellow submarines in this aerial ocean. Each grain carries the genetic dreams of distant flowers, and now they float freely through your space like golden wishes. Some are perfectly round, others shaped like tiny footballs or covered in microscopic spikes. In the streaming sunlight, they glow like miniature lanterns. Pet hair, if you have furry companions, creates the longest, most graceful streamers in your floating world. Each hair moves like seaweed in an underwater current, bending and flexing as air flows around it. The static electricity that builds up on these floating hairs attracts dust particles, creating tiny clusters that drift together like small communities. Your breath doesn't just move particles. It changes the humidity of the air around you. This moisture creates nearly invisible clouds that bend light slightly, making the air itself shimmer in the sunbeams. When you speak or laugh, these moisture clouds spread outward, carrying the warmth of your body and the essence of your voice into the floating world around you. The temperature of your body, normally lost to the surrounding air, now creates gentle thermal updrafts that lift particles around you. You become a warm island in the sea of air, generating your own weather patterns. Dust particles spiral up along your arms and legs, following the invisible heat columns rising from your skin. Even your thoughts seem to influence this floating dance. When you move suddenly, surprised by the beauty around you, the sharp intake of breath creates a small pressure drop near your mouth. Particles drift toward you, then scatter as you exhale in wonder. Your emotions have become part of the physics of the room. The windows in your home now frame a completely different view. Outside, leaves don't fall from trees. They detach and begin their own floating journey, some rising, others drifting sideways, creating a slow-motion leaf storm that defies every autumn memory you've ever held. Birds, confused by this new reality, flap their wings frantically but move in unexpected directions, creating their own air currents that stir the floating world of outdoor dust and pollen. Inside, the boundary between you and your environment dissolves. The dust you might have once considered dirty or annoying reveals itself as a galaxy of stories. Each particle has traveled from somewhere else, carried by wind or clothing or pets. Some pieces came from distant deserts, others from the wear of your favorite shoes, still others from the slow breakdown of pages in beloved books. Now they all dance together in the golden light, equal citizens in this weightless realm. Your body begins to remember something ancient, something from before you learned to expect the pull of down. Deep in your cells, in the fluid that surrounds your organs, tiny changes start to occur. Your inner ear, which normally uses gravity to tell you which way is up, sends confused signals to your brain. The calcium crystals in your inner ear that usually settle downward now float freely in their fluid chambers. Your sense of balance, built over millions of years of evolution, struggles to adapt to this impossible situation. You feel slightly dizzy, not unpleasantly, but in a way that makes you more aware of your body than usual. Your heart continues its faithful rhythm, but it no longer needs to work as hard to pump blood upward against gravity's pull. The blood vessels in your legs, usually stretched by the weight of the blood column above them, begin to relax. Your circulatory system starts to redistribute fluids throughout your body in new ways. These changes happen slowly, gently, like your body is remembering a dream it had long ago. But what happens when the emotions that usually fall as tears decide to stay and float around your eyes? Close your eyes and place your hand gently over your heart. Feel that steady rhythm, that reliable drumbeat that has played without pause since before you were born. This faithful muscle, no bigger than your fist, has been working against gravity every moment of your life. Until now. In this weightless world, your heart discovers something extraordinary. For the first time since you took your very first breath, it doesn't have to fight the downward pull of gravity to send blood to your brain. The effort that has shaped every heartbeat for your entire life suddenly becomes unnecessary. Your heart feels this change immediately, like a runner who suddenly realizes the hill they've been climbing has become flat ground. Every day on Earth, your heart pumps about 2,000 gallons of blood through your body. That's enough to fill a small swimming pool. To push blood up from your toes to your brain, against gravity's constant pull, your heart muscle squeezes with tremendous force. The pressure it creates is strong enough to squirt blood 6 feet into the air, like a gentle fountain of life. But now, without gravity's resistance, that same powerful squeeze sends blood flowing through your body with unexpected ease. The blood in your legs, which usually pulls slightly from gravity's downward tug, begins to shift upward. Slowly, gently, more blood flows toward your chest and head. Your face feels slightly fuller, warmer, as if you're lying upside down on a comfortable bed. This is exactly what astronauts experience when they first reach space. Your cardiovascular system, that amazing network of blood vessels stretching 60,000 miles through your body, starts to readjust like a river system adapting to new terrain. The veins in your legs, normally stretched and working hard to push blood back up to your heart, begin to relax. These vessels have been Earth's gravity-fighters for your entire life, equipped with tiny one-way valves that prevent blood from flowing backward. Now these valves still work perfectly, but their job becomes much easier. Your heart rate begins to slow, just slightly. Not in a worrying way, but in the way of a machine that realizes it doesn't need to work quite so hard. Each beat becomes more efficient, moving blood through your weightless body with graceful ease. The baroreceptors in your neck, special sensors that monitor blood pressure, detect these changes and send gentle messages to your brain. These tiny biological instruments have been fine-tuned by millions of years of evolution to maintain perfect balance in a gravity-bound world. Now they must learn new patterns, like musicians adapting to a different key. Blood that once fought its way upward now flows in three-dimensional currents through your body. The familiar up and down geography of your circulation transforms into something more like ocean currents, flowing in loops and spirals that follow the branching paths of your blood vessels. Your capillaries, those microscopic blood vessels smaller than human hair, experience their own quiet revolution. On Earth, gravity helps blood flow through the capillaries in your lungs, where oxygen and carbon dioxide are exchanged. In weightlessness, this exchange continues, but the fluid dynamics change in subtle ways that scientists are still studying. The lymphatic system, your body's drainage network, also adapts to this new reality. Lymph fluid, which normally relies partly on gravity to flow through your body and carry away waste products, must find new ways to circulate. Your muscle movements become more important for pushing this clear fluid through its channels. Real astronauts tell fascinating stories about these changes. During their first days in space, many experience a feeling of fullness in their heads, as if they have a mild cold. This happens because blood and other fluids shift toward the upper body without gravity to keep them distributed evenly. Their faces become slightly puffy, giving them what space doctors playfully called puffy head bird leg syndrome. Blood moves away from their legs toward their heads and chests. After a few days, their bodies adapt beautifully to this new fluid distribution. Some astronauts report that their sense of taste changes in space. Scientists believe this happens partly because the fluid shifts affect the sinuses and nasal passages, changing how flavors reach the taste receptors. Food that tastes perfectly normal on Earth might seem bland in weightlessness. Your kidneys, those amazing filters that clean your blood, must also adapt to the new fluid patterns in your body. They sense the increased blood volume in your upper body and respond by producing more urine, helping to balance your body's fluid levels. This is why astronauts often need to use the bathroom more frequently during their first days in space. The red blood cells flowing through your arteries and veins carry the same precious cargo of oxygen they always have, but now they travel through a transformed landscape. Without gravity to influence their movement, they distribute more evenly throughout your circulatory system. Your bone marrow, deep inside your bones, notices these circulation changes too. In the long term, the cells that produce new blood cells adjust their production to match your body's new needs. Your weightless body becomes incredibly efficient at maintaining exactly the right amount of blood for this new environment. The autonomic nervous system, which controls your heart rate and blood pressure without you having to think about it, begins a gentle recalibration. This ancient system, evolved over millions of years of life under gravity's influence, shows remarkable flexibility in adapting to weightlessness. Even your sleep patterns may shift as your cardiovascular system adjusts. The familiar rhythm of blood pressure rising and falling throughout the day takes on new patterns. Your heart, that constant companion, finds its new rhythm surprisingly quickly. Athletes and dancers sometimes experience a hint of these changes when they perform movements that defy gravity, like spinning in the air or hanging upside down. But in true weightlessness, every cell in your cardiovascular system gets to experience this liberation from gravity's pull. Your heart continues its faithful work, but now it beats like a drum in a different acoustic space. The sound is the same, but the resonance has changed. The muscle that has worked so hard for so long against gravity's resistance discovers the joy of effortless circulation. As your cardiovascular system settles into its new weightless rhythm, you become aware of other changes happening throughout your body. What happens when joy or wonder tries to fall as tears, but finds itself unable to leave your eyes? Imagine feeling overwhelmed by the beauty around you. The wonder of floating coffee, dancing dust, your heart's new gentle rhythm. Emotion wells up inside you, that familiar tightness in your throat that signals tears are coming. But in this weightless world, even tears must follow new rules. The moisture gathers in your eyes as it always has, produced by the tiny lacrimal glands tucked beneath your upper eyelids. These faithful glands work exactly as they always do, releasing the salty water that keeps your eyes healthy and expresses your deepest feelings. The chemistry is identical to Earth tears: water, salt, proteins, and tiny traces of the emotions that triggered them. But gravity is no longer there to pull these tears down your cheeks. Instead, something magical happens. The tear forms at the inner corner of your eye, growing slowly into a perfect, trembling sphere. Surface tension, that invisible force that holds soap bubbles together, becomes the new master of your tears. The water molecules cling to each other with gentle determination, creating the most efficient shape possible, a flawless ball of liquid emotion. This tear sphere grows larger as more moisture joins it, fed by the continuous flow from your tear ducts. It wobbles slightly, catching light from the window like a tiny crystal ball. The sphere clings to your eye, held there by the same surface tension that shapes it, reluctant to let go of this familiar anchor. When you blink, the tear doesn't streak downward as it would on Earth. Instead, it maintains its spherical perfection, perhaps shifting slightly along your eyelid, but staying close to home. Each blink reshapes it gently, like a soft massage for this floating jewel of water and feeling. Astronauts have experienced this exact phenomenon. In the International Space Station, tears collect around the eyes in growing bubbles that can become surprisingly large before they finally break free. Some astronauts report tears growing to the size of contact lenses, creating a strange underwater vision effect until they wipe them away. The emotional impact of tears that cannot fall is profound and unexpected. On Earth, the act of tears rolling down your face is part of the emotional release. The physical sensation of wetness on your cheek signals to your brain that the emotion is being expressed, processed, released into the world. But when tears stay put, clinging to your eyes like liquid ornaments, the emotional experience changes in subtle ways. Some astronauts describe feeling like their emotions are more concentrated, more present, when tears cannot escape through the familiar ritual of falling and wiping away. The tears become constant companions, gentle reminders of the feeling that created them, rather than temporary visitors that quickly disappear. If you try to wipe these floating tears away with your finger, they don't absorb into tissue or evaporate as they do on Earth. Instead, they transfer to your fingertip, forming new spheres that cling to your skin. You can push them around your face like tiny water balloons, watching them merge with other tears or break apart into smaller spheres. When tears finally do break free from your eyes, they don't fall. They float away slowly, drifting through the air like microscopic planets carrying the essence of your emotions. These floating tear spheres can travel surprising distances, moved by air currents, your breath, or the gentle movements of your body. The salt content in your tears affects their behavior in weightlessness. Tears are slightly denser than pure water because of dissolved minerals and proteins. This density difference, invisible on Earth where gravity pulls everything downward equally, becomes more noticeable in space where every tiny variation in mass affects movement. Happy tears and sad tears may actually behave slightly differently in weightlessness. Emotional tears contain different chemical compositions than the basic moisture that keeps your eyes lubricated. Tears of joy, sorrow, frustration, or relief each carry their own unique mixture of hormones and proteins, potentially affecting their surface tension and floating behavior in microscopic but measurable ways. Your tear ducts continue their ancient work, but they must adapt to this new reality. The normal drainage system that carries excess tears into your nasal passages through tiny channels in your eyelids still functions, but without gravity's help, the flow becomes more dependent on blinking and eye movement to push the moisture along. The temperature of your tears matters more in weightlessness. Warm tears from fresh emotion remain liquid and spherical. But if the air around you is cool, floating tears can begin to evaporate from their surfaces, slowly shrinking as they drift through your space, leaving behind tiny crystalline particles of salt and protein. Laughter tears present their own unique challenge in this weightless world. The rapid blinking and facial muscle contractions that accompany deep laughter can launch tear spheres away from your eyes with surprising force. These joy bubbles bounce gently off surfaces, leaving tiny wet spots that mark the path of your happiness through the room. Your eyes themselves feel different when tears cannot fall freely. The constant presence of moisture spheres creates a subtle lens effect, slightly magnifying or distorting your vision around the edges. Some astronauts describe this as wearing water goggles that constantly shift and change shape. The reflex to wipe your eyes remains strong, even when tears aren't streaming down your face. Your brain, programmed by millions of years of gravity-based tear behavior, keeps sending signals to brush away moisture that isn't behaving as expected. This phantom wiping reflex continues for days until your nervous system adapts to the new reality. Emotional tears that float away from your eyes don't simply disappear. They join the ecosystem of your weightless environment, eventually encountering walls, furniture, or other surfaces where they spread into thin films of water. Your emotions become part of the physical environment around you in ways impossible on Earth. The act of crying itself transforms into something more meditative, less cathartic. Without the familiar sensation of tears flowing and falling, emotional release requires new rituals. Some astronauts report that emotions feel more internal, more contemplative, when tears cannot complete their traditional journey down the cheeks. Your body learns to process feelings through other physical sensations. The tightness in your throat, the flutter in your chest, the warmth behind your eyes become more important signals of emotional expression when tears choose to stay and float rather than fall and fade. As you float in this tearless world, surrounded by perfect spheres of your own emotions drifting slowly through the air, you begin to sense other changes happening around you. What happens to the very ground beneath your feet when it no longer needs to bear the weight of everything above? Beneath your floating body, something extraordinary begins to happen. The solid ground that has supported every footstep you've ever taken starts to remember what it was like before gravity's relentless pull shaped every stone, every grain of sand, every towering peak. The Earth itself begins to breathe. For billions of years, our planet has been compressed under its own immense weight. Every mountain, every valley, every layer of rock has been squeezed and molded by the inward pull of gravity. The Earth's crust, that thin skin of solid rock we live upon has been pressed downward with a force so constant and powerful that we cannot imagine the world any other way. Until now. Without gravity's downward pressure, the very foundations of the world start to expand. Deep beneath your feet, rock that has been compressed for millions of years begins to stretch and grow. The process happens slowly at first, like a flower opening in the morning sun, but with consequences that ripple outward through the entire planet. The mountains feel this change first. Imagine the Himalayas, those ancient giants that have stood guard over Asia for 50 million years. Mount Everest, compressed under its own massive weight, has always been shorter than it wanted to be. The rock layers that form its peak have been squeezed together like a stack of pancakes under a heavy plate. Now, without gravity to hold everything down, these compressed layers begin to separate. The mountain starts to grow taller, not by adding new rock, but by expanding the rock that was already there. Like a sponge that has been squeezed tight and suddenly released, Everest stretches upward toward the sky. But it doesn't stop there. The entire mountain range begins to rise and spread. The Himalayas, no longer held in their familiar positions by gravitational compression, start to drift apart. Each peak becomes an island of rock, floating gently away from its neighbors. The mountain chain that once formed a solid wall across the continent transforms into a scattered archipelago of floating stone giants. This same transformation happens to every mountain range on Earth. The Rocky Mountains stretch and separate like vertebrae in a spine that's finally allowed to relax. The Andes begin their own slow dance away from the western edge of South America. The Alps drift apart like a family of stone clouds above Europe. The valleys between these mountains, carved over millions of years by rivers and glacier, no longer have floors. As the peaks float upward and outward, the valleys become three-dimensional spaces, empty air pockets where solid ground once lay. Rivers that flowed downhill for centuries now find themselves flowing through empty space, their water forming spectacular floating streams that connect the scattered mountain islands. But the changes go deeper than the mountains. The Earth's crust itself, the rigid shell of rock that has held its shape for billions of years, begins to expand like a balloon being slowly inflated. Without gravity to compress it inward, the planet starts to grow larger, its surface stretching and spreading in all directions. The continents, those massive puzzle pieces that have drifted slowly across the Earth's surface for hundreds of millions of years, suddenly find themselves free from the friction that has guided their movement. No longer pressed against the planet's surface by their own weight, they begin to lift away from the expanding sphere below. North America rises gently from its oceanic bed, floating like an enormous stone raft above the growing planet. The familiar outline of the continent remains recognizable, but now it drifts through space rather than resting on solid ground. The Great Lakes become floating pools of water, held together by surface tension, following their continental island through the void. Europe and Asia, once connected by land bridges and mountain chains, separate into distinct floating continents. The Mediterranean Sea, no longer contained by gravitational pressure, expands into a perfect sphere of salt water, rotating slowly as it drifts between the rising landmasses. Africa, that ancient continent where human civilization began, lifts majestically from the Earth's surface. The Sahara Desert becomes a floating sea of sand, its dunes now three-dimensional sculptures that shift and flow in the absence of up and down. The Nile River transforms into a ribbon of water connecting floating sections of the continent like a liquid highway through space. Australia, already an island, becomes something even more isolated and beautiful. The continent floats serenely through space, its unique ecosystem of floating forests and drifting deserts creating a living spaceship of evolution's dreams. The ocean floors, suddenly relieved of the tremendous pressure of miles-deep water, begin their own transformation. Underwater mountain ranges that have been compressed under oceanic weight for millions of years start to expand upward. The Mid-Atlantic Ridge, that underwater mountain chain that has been spreading the ocean floor for 180 million years, suddenly accelerates its growth, no longer fighting against gravitational compression. Deep-sea trenches, those underwater canyons that mark where tectonic plates once dove beneath each other, begin to close as the plates float free from gravitational pressure. The Mariana Trench, deeper than Mount Everest is tall, starts to shallow as its walls drift apart and upward. The very center of the Earth experiences the most dramatic change of all. For billions of years, the planet's iron core has been compressed into a solid ball by the weight of all the rock above it. This core, hot as the surface of the sun, has been squeezed so tightly that iron behaves more like liquid than metal. Without gravity to maintain this compression, the core begins to expand. Iron that has been solid for eons starts to melt and spread. The magnetic field generated by the Earth's rotating core, which protects us from harmful solar radiation, begins to change as the core transforms from a compressed ball into an expanding sphere of molten metal. The Earth's magnetic poles, which have wandered slowly across the planet's surface for millions of years, start to shift more dramatically as the magnetic field reorganizes itself around the expanding core. Compass needles around the world spin in confusion, no longer able to find magnetic north in a planet whose very magnetic identity is transforming. Tectonic plates, those massive sections of the Earth's crust that have been grinding against each other for billions of years, suddenly find themselves floating free. The ring of fire around the Pacific Ocean, where volcanic activity has shaped landscapes and triggered earthquakes for millions of years, becomes a circle of floating volcanic islands, each one drifting on its own path through space. Volcanoes themselves undergo their own transformation. No longer constrained by gravitational pressure, magma that has been trapped beneath the Earth's surface begins to flow more freely. Some volcanoes become gentler, releasing their molten rock in floating streams rather than explosive eruptions. Others simply lift away from the planet's surface entirely, becoming flying mountains of volcanic activity. The changes happen gradually, like a time-lapse film of geological transformation that normally takes millions of years, compressed into hours. You float above this expanding, transforming world, watching continents drift apart like pieces of a three-dimensional puzzle coming undone. But as the solid Earth transforms beneath you, the liquid oceans above begin their own incredible dance through space. What happens when all the water in all the seas suddenly finds itself free to follow its own fluid dreams? As the continents drift apart like floating islands, something even more magical begins to happen. The vast oceans of Earth, those ancient bodies of water that have covered most of our planet for billions of years, start to remember what they were like before gravity taught them to be flat. The Pacific Ocean, that enormous expanse of water stretching from Asia to the Americas, begins to lift away from the ocean floor like a massive, living blanket. Without gravity to hold it down in its familiar basin, the water starts to gather itself into something extraordinary. Surface tension, the same invisible force that holds your morning coffee in perfect spheres, now becomes the ocean's new master. This gentle molecular attraction, usually overwhelmed by gravity's pull, suddenly finds itself in charge of shaping the world's water. The Pacific doesn't become one giant sphere, as you might imagine. Instead, it transforms into thousands, then millions of floating water worlds, each one a perfect liquid planet ranging from the size of swimming pools to bodies of water larger than entire countries. Picture the most beautiful sight imaginable, translucent blue spheres of ocean water floating serenely through space, each one spinning slowly and catching starlight like liquid jewels. Some are so large you could sail across them for days. Others are small enough to swim through in a few strokes. Within these floating ocean spheres, life continues its ancient dance, but with new choreography. Whales, those gentle giants of the deep, find themselves swimming through three-dimensional water worlds instead of across ocean surfaces. A blue whale might swim completely around a medium-sized water sphere, exploring its entire liquid planet in a single graceful journey. The whale's massive body creates currents that flow around the sphere's interior, generating gentle whirlpools and streams that other sea creatures can ride like underwater highways. Schools of fish discover they can swim in directions that never existed before. Instead of being limited to swimming up, down, left, or right, they can now swim through and around their liquid worlds in ways that defy every instinct evolution gave them. A school of dolphins might swim straight through the center of a water sphere, emerging on the other side like liquid rockets, their joyful clicking echoing strangely in the spherical space. Jellyfish become the most graceful dancers in this new ocean ballet. Their translucent bells pulse rhythmically as they navigate through the curved walls of water spheres, sometimes swimming along the inner surface like living decorations on the inside of liquid snow globes. Their bioluminescent glow creates moving patterns of light that shine through the water sphere walls, making each floating ocean a lantern in space. The tides, those ancient rhythms driven by the moon's gravitational pull, transform into something completely new. Without gravity to create the familiar rise and fall of water levels, the moon's influence creates gentle currents that flow through and between the floating water spheres. These currents connect different ocean spheres like liquid bridges, allowing sea life to migrate between water worlds on invisible pathways. Coral reefs, those underwater cities built over thousands of years, find themselves in floating water globes of their own. The Great Barrier Reef becomes a collection of living spheres, each one a complete ecosystem suspended in space. Tropical fish swim around the outside surfaces of these reef spheres as easily as they swim through the interior, creating a three-dimensional garden of color and life. The deepest parts of the old oceans, places like the Mariana Trench where strange creatures lived in eternal darkness under crushing pressure, become their own mysterious water worlds. These dark spheres contain the strangest fish, creatures that have never seen sunlight, now floating through space in their own private liquid planets. Giant squid navigate through these midnight blue spheres like living submarines, their tentacles creating currents that spiral through the dark water. Ocean currents, those great rivers within the sea that have carried warmth and nutrients around the planet for millions of years, transform into flowing streams that connect the floating water spheres. The Gulf Stream becomes a warm river flowing through space, carrying tropical fish and warm water from sphere to sphere across what used to be the Atlantic Ocean. Waves, those endless dancers that have rolled across ocean surfaces since water first gathered on Earth, take on entirely new forms. In the floating water spheres, waves travel in 3 dimensions, creating ripples that flow around the entire sphere surface like liquid latitude and longitude lines. Storm waves become spectacular light shows as they race around the curved surfaces of water worlds, their white caps creating moving patterns of foam that sparkle in the sunlight. Sea foam and bubbles, no longer able to rise to a surface, create magical snowstorm effects within the water spheres. Millions of tiny bubbles drift through the liquid interior like underwater snow, sometimes gathering into larger bubble clusters that float and merge in patterns impossible under gravity's rule. The salt in the ocean water behaves differently in these floating spheres. Without gravity to mix the water constantly, areas of different salinity begin to separate into layers and swirls visible from outside the spheres. Some water worlds develop beautiful spiral patterns of salt concentration, like liquid galaxies spinning slowly in space. Marine plants, from the tiniest phytoplankton to giant kelp forests, adapt to their new 3-dimensional environment. Kelp that once grew upward towards sunlight now grows in all directions within its water sphere, creating underwater forests that fill the entire liquid space. These spherical forests become perfect hiding places for fish and other sea creatures, like underwater Christmas tree ornaments filled with life. The Arctic and Antarctic ice, freed from gravity's pull, transform into floating ice sculptures. Icebergs become crystal palaces drifting through space, some still surrounded by spheres of cold seawater where polar bears and penguins continue their lives in floating Arctic worlds. Sea turtles navigate between water spheres on migration routes no Earth creature has ever traveled before, swimming through space itself to reach different liquid worlds. Their ancient navigation instincts, evolved over millions of years to follow magnetic fields and star patterns, now guide them on 3-dimensional journeys between floating oceans. The sound of the ocean changes completely in these floating water worlds. Whale songs no longer echo across vast flat surfaces but resonate within the spherical chambers, creating music that bounces and amplifies in ways that transform each water sphere into a natural concert hall. As you float above this transformed Earth, watching thousands of ocean spheres drift through space like liquid planets, each one alive with swimming creatures and flowing currents, you begin to sense an even greater transformation happening far above. What happens when our sun itself, that reliable source of warmth and light, finds its nuclear fires suddenly free from gravity's restraining embrace? Turn your face toward the window and feel the gentle warmth of sunlight on your skin. That light has traveled 93 million miles through the cold emptiness of space to reach you. But today, something extraordinary is happening to the star that has faithfully lit and warmed our world for over 4 billion years. Our sun is beginning to transform. For its entire life, the sun has been engaged in a constant battle between 2 opposing forces. Nuclear fusion in its core creates tremendous outward pressure, like billions of hydrogen bombs exploding every second, trying to blow the star apart. But gravity, that same gentle force that has held you close to Earth, has always pulled inward with equal strength, keeping the sun compressed into its familiar ball of fire. Without gravity's restraining embrace, this ancient balance suddenly tips. The sun begins to expand, not violently, but with the gentle grace of a flower opening to greet the morning. The nuclear fires at its heart, no longer compressed into a dense core, start to spread outward like golden honey flowing through space. The star that has appeared as a perfect circle in Earth's sky for all of human history begins to bloom into something larger, softer, more magnificent. Imagine a dandelion transforming from a tight bud into its full, fuzzy sphere. This is how the sun begins its transformation, growing from a compressed ball of nuclear fire into an expanded cloud of stellar beauty. The sun's surface, called the photosphere, begins to stretch and expand. Areas of cooler gas, normally held close to the star by gravity, start to drift outward like luminous clouds. Solar prominences, those spectacular arcs of plasma that normally loop back toward the sun's surface, now flow freely into space like rivers of liquid light. The solar wind, that stream of charged particles constantly flowing from the sun, becomes gentler and more widespread. Without gravity to focus this stellar breath into concentrated streams, the solar wind spreads more evenly throughout the solar system, creating a softer, more diffused flow of solar energy. Sunspots, those dark patches on the sun's surface that appear and disappear in 11-year cycles, begin to behave differently. These cooler regions, normally held in place by the sun's magnetic field and gravitational forces, start to drift and separate. Some float away from the main body of the expanding sun like dark islands in an ocean of light. The sun's magnetic field, generated by the movement of electrically charged particles within the stellar interior, begins to stretch and change as the star expands. The familiar magnetic field lines that normally arch gracefully from the sun's surface start to extend further into space, creating a larger magnetic embrace around our solar system. This expanding magnetic field affects the aurora displays on Earth in beautiful ways. The northern and southern lights, normally visible only near the poles, begin to appear at lower latitudes as the sun's strengthened magnetic influence interacts with Earth's atmosphere in new patterns. The sky fills with gentle curtains of green, blue, and red light dancing across latitudes where aurora have never been seen before. The light reaching Earth begins to change subtly. The sun, now larger and less dense, produces a slightly different spectrum of colors. The morning light streaming through your window carries new wavelengths, creating sunbeams that seem somehow softer, warmer, more golden than before. Plants around the world respond to these changes in solar radiation. Photosynthesis, the process that converts sunlight into the energy that feeds all life on Earth, adapts to the new solar spectrum. Trees and flowers that normally follow strict seasonal patterns begin to experience a different rhythm, as if spring and summer are blending into something entirely new. The sun's expansion affects the orbits of all the planets in ways both subtle and profound. Mercury, the innermost planet, finds itself bathed in the sun's expanded outer layers. The tiny world becomes a glowing ember, heated not just by solar radiation but by direct contact with the star's extended atmosphere. Venus, shrouded in its thick, toxic atmosphere, experiences temperatures that would melt lead as the expanding sun's influence reaches closer to its orbit. The planet's dense clouds begin to glow with their own heat, turning Venus into a bright star visible from Earth even during daylight. Mars, the red planet, starts to warm for the first time in millions of years. Ancient polar ice caps begin to sublimate, releasing water vapor that has been locked in frozen form since the planet's atmosphere thinned billions of years ago. The Martian sky, normally a butterscotch color, takes on new hues as water vapor creates thin, wispy clouds. The gas giant planets experience their own transformations. Jupiter, that massive world with storms larger than Earth, finds its great red spot beginning to change as the altered solar wind affects the planet's atmospheric dynamics. The storm that has raged for centuries starts to shift and evolve in response to the new solar environment. Saturn's magnificent rings begin to sparkle differently in the light of the expanding sun. The countless ice particles and rocky debris that create the ring system reflect the changed solar radiation, making the rings appear more luminous, more colorful than they have been in millions of years. But perhaps the most beautiful change happens to the sun itself as viewed from Earth. The familiar bright disk that has defined day and night for all of human history begins to appear larger, softer, more like a gentle lantern than a harsh spotlight. Sunrise and sunset become even more spectacular as the expanded sun creates longer, more gradual transitions between day and night. The sun's corona, that ethereal crown of plasma normally visible only during solar eclipses, begins to extend much further into space. This ghostly halo of charged particles, heated to millions of degrees, becomes more prominent and easier to see from Earth. The boundary between the sun and the space around it becomes less distinct, more like the edge of a cloud than the sharp outline of a solid object. Solar flares, those explosive releases of magnetic energy from the sun's surface, take on new characteristics. Instead of violent explosions that shoot charged particles toward Earth in dangerous bursts, they become more like gentle fireworks, spreading their energy more evenly across the expanding solar surface. The heliosphere, that bubble of solar influence that extends far beyond Pluto and protects our solar system from interstellar radiation, begins to grow larger and more diffuse. Our entire solar system finds itself wrapped in a softer, more extensive embrace of solar protection. As you feel the sunlight on your face, you're experiencing radiation from a star in the process of transformation. Each photon that touches your skin was created in the nuclear furnace of the sun's core and has spent thousands of years traveling through the stellar interior before beginning its 8-minute journey through space to reach you. But the sun is not the only thing in the universe affected by this cosmic change. Time itself, Einstein discovered, is intimately connected to gravity's presence. What happens when the very flow of time begins to move differently in a world where gravity has stepped away? Something subtle and profound is changing around you, something so fundamental that you might not notice it at first. It's not the floating coffee or the dancing dust or even your heart's new gentle rhythm. It's something more basic than all of these, more essential than breath itself. Time is changing. Albert Einstein, that gentle genius with wild hair and kind eyes, discovered one of the universe's most beautiful secrets over 100 years ago. He learned that time and space are not separate things, but woven together into a single fabric called space-time. More surprisingly still, he found that gravity doesn't just pull on objects. It bends time itself. Right now, as you float in this weightless world, you're experiencing Einstein's discovery in the most personal way possible. On Earth, gravity has been stretching and compressing time around you every second of your life without you ever knowing it. Near massive objects, time flows slightly slower than it does in empty space. On the surface of our planet, time moves a tiny bit more slowly than it would if you were floating far from any gravitational influence. The difference is incredibly small. So small that the most sensitive atomic clocks can barely measure it. But it's real, and it's been affecting your entire life in ways both invisible and profound. Think of space-time like a soft mattress. When you place a heavy bowling ball in the center, it creates a dip, a curved valley that affects how marbles roll across the surface. In the same way, Earth's mass creates a gentle curve in space-time, and this curve is what we experience as gravity's pull. But here's the magical part: time flows more slowly at the bottom of that curve than it does at the top. This means that time has been moving slightly faster for your head than for your feet throughout your entire life. The difference is infinitesimally small, but over the years, your head has aged just a tiny fraction of a second more than your feet. You are quite literally older at the top than at the bottom. GPS satellites orbiting high above Earth must account for this time difference. Their atomic clocks tick faster in the weaker gravitational field of their orbit than identical clocks on Earth's surface. Without Einstein's equations to correct for this difference, GPS navigation would become wildly inaccurate within hours. Now, in your weightless world, this gravitational time dilation begins to fade away. As gravity's influence disappears, time around you starts to flow more evenly, more smoothly. The subtle compressions and stretches that Earth's gravity has been creating in the fabric of space-time begin to relax, like wrinkles slowly smoothing out of silk. You don't feel this change directly, because you are part of the space-time that's transforming. It's like being inside a flowing river. You move with the current, so from your perspective, you seem to be standing still while the banks slide by. Similarly, as time changes around you, your thoughts, your heartbeat, your very perception of duration change along with it. But the effects ripple outward in ways both subtle and strange. Light, which travels at exactly the same speed in all reference frames, begins to behave slightly differently as it moves through this transformed spacetime. The light from distant stars, which has been following curved paths through space as it travels toward Earth, starts to travel in straighter lines as gravity's influence on spacetime geometry fades. This means the positions of stars in the night sky begin to shift very slightly. Stars that have appeared in specific locations for thousands of years start to drift as their light follows new, less curved paths through space. The constellations that have guided sailors and dreamers for millennia begin their own slow dance across the heavens. The Moon, which has been our faithful companion for over 4 billion years, experiences its own relationship with time differently now. The gravitational time dilation that has synchronized Earth and Moon throughout their long cosmic dance begins to change. Their ancient rhythm, which has controlled ocean tides and influenced life cycles since the beginning, starts to shift in ways too subtle for immediate perception but profound in their long-term implications. Your own biological clock, that internal timekeeper that has regulated your sleep, hunger, and cellular function since birth, begins to adjust to this new temporal environment. The circadian rhythms that have evolved over millions of years to match Earth's 24-hour rotation start to find their own natural pace, freed from the subtle gravitational influences that have helped shape them. The water in your cells, the very molecules that make up your body, experience time's passage differently now. Chemical reactions that depend on precise timing continue at their own rates, but the space-time context in which they occur has subtly shifted. Your metabolism, your brain function, your heart's electrical signals all continue their vital work, but in a temporal landscape that has never existed before in Earth's history. Einstein showed us that energy and matter are equivalent, connected by his famous equation E equals mc squared. In this weightless world, as the relationship between matter and spacetime changes, the energy that flows through your body and all living things begins to follow slightly different patterns through the fabric of reality. Electromagnetic radiation, from radio waves to visible light to X-rays, all travel through space at the speed of light. But the paths they follow depend on the curvature of space-time. As gravity's influence fades and spacetime becomes less curved, electromagnetic energy begins to flow more directly, less influenced by the bending effects of massive objects. This affects communication satellites, radio broadcasts, and even the light from your cell phone screen. Radio waves that normally follow curved paths as they travel around Earth's gravitational field begin to travel in straighter lines, potentially changing how electronic devices communicate with each other. The quantum vacuum itself, that seemingly empty space that actually buzzes with virtual particles constantly appearing and disappearing, responds to changes in spacetime curvature. As gravity's effect on spacetime diminishes, the quantum field that underlies all reality settles into a slightly different state, like a musical instrument being retuned to a new key. Your thoughts, which are electrical and chemical processes occurring in your brain, happen within this transformed temporal landscape. The neurons that fire when you remember, dream, or wonder about your floating world do so in a spacetime that has never existed before. Your consciousness experiences duration and sequence in a reality where time itself has become lighter, less constrained by gravity's ancient influence. The very atoms that compose your body vibrate at frequencies that define the fundamental constants of physics. As spacetime relaxes around you, these atomic oscillations continue unchanged, but their relationship to the larger fabric of reality shifts in ways that connect you more directly to the basic rhythms of the universe. As you drift in this transformed world, your perception of moments passing takes on a different quality. Not faster, not slower, but somehow more pure, less influenced by the gravitational forces that have shaped temporal experience since the beginning of time itself. Deep in your bones, in the very calcium and minerals that have held you upright against gravity's pull for your entire life, ancient memories begin to stir. What stories do your bones tell when they no longer need to fight the patient pull of Earth? Deep within your floating body, something ancient begins to stir. It's not in your conscious mind or your beating heart or even your gentle breath. It's deeper than thought, older than memory, written in the very architecture of your bones. Your skeleton remembers gravity. Every bone in your body is a story written in calcium and time. For your entire life, gravity has been your bones' constant teacher, shaping them with patient, persistent lessons about weight and support, pressure and resistance. Now, in this weightless world, these ancient students begin to recall what they learned in their long classroom under gravity's guidance. Your bones are not the solid, unchanging structures you might imagine. They are living tissue, as alive and dynamic as your skin or your muscles. Every day, special cells called osteoblasts build new bone material while other cells called osteoclasts break down old bone tissue. Your skeleton completely rebuilds itself every 7 to 10 years, replacing every calcium crystal, every protein fiber, every microscopic strut and beam. This constant rebuilding process has been guided by gravity since the moment you were born. When you walk, run, or simply stand upright, your bones feel the stress of supporting your body weight against gravity's downward pull. This stress is like a gentle massage that tells your bones exactly where they need to be strong. Areas that bear more weight develop denser, stronger bone tissue. Places that experience less stress remain lighter and more flexible. Your leg bones, those pillars that have carried you through every step of your life, are masterpieces of gravitational engineering. The femur in your thigh is the longest, strongest bone in your body, built like a hollow tube for maximum strength with minimum weight. Its internal structure resembles the support beams of a skyscraper, with tiny struts and arches perfectly positioned to handle the forces of walking, jumping, and dancing under gravity's constant influence. Your hip bones have evolved into the perfect cradle for supporting your upper body's weight. The ball and socket joint where your femur meets your pelvis has been shaped by millions of years of evolution and refined by your lifetime of gravitational experience. Every time you shift your weight from one foot to the other, these bones feel and remember the patterns of force and support. Your spine tells perhaps the most beautiful story of all. Each vertebra in your back has been custom shaped by the way you sit, stand, and move through your gravitational world. The gentle curves of your spine, from your neck to your lower back, are not random. They are gravity's signature, written in bone over years of learning to balance your head, arms, and torso against the downward pull that has never ceased until now. The tiny bones in your inner ear, the smallest bones in your entire body, have been especially attuned to gravity's presence. These delicate structures, no bigger than grains of rice, contain calcium crystals that settle downward under gravity's influence, constantly telling your brain which way is up and which way is down. They are your body's built-in compass, calibrated to Earth's gravitational field. In this weightless world, these inner ear crystals float freely in their fluid chambers, no longer pulled in any particular direction. Your sense of balance, normally so automatic that you never think about it, becomes confused. You might feel slightly dizzy, not unpleasantly, but in a way that makes you more aware of your body's relationship with space and direction. Your bones also remember falling. Every stumble, every trip, every childhood tumble has left its mark in your skeletal memory. Not as damage, but as wisdom. Each time you've lost your balance and caught yourself, your bones have learned a little more about how to distribute force, how to absorb impact, how to recover from unexpected stress. Your skeleton is a library of every gravitational challenge you've ever faced and overcome. Astronauts who spend months in space experience profound changes in their bone structure. Without gravity's constant loading and unloading, their bones begin to lose density at a rate of about 1% per month. The osteoblasts, those bone-building cells, slow their work when they no longer receive the mechanical stress signals that gravity provides. Meanwhile, the osteoclasts continue breaking down old bone tissue, creating an imbalance that leads to bone loss. But this process is reversible. When astronauts return to Earth, their bones gradually rebuild their strength as they readjust to gravitational loading. The skeleton remembers its Earth patterns and works to restore them. Your bones also carry genetic memories that stretch back millions of years. The DNA in your bone cells contains instructions written by countless generations of your ancestors, all of whom lived under gravity's influence. Fish that learned to support their bodies as they ventured onto land. Early mammals that developed strong leg bones for running across ancient plains. Primates that strengthened their arm bones for swinging through trees. This evolutionary history lives in your bones as surely as your personal history does. Your skeleton is not just your own story, but a chapter in the much longer story of life learning to thrive in a gravitational world. The calcium in your bones came from ancient seas, concentrated in the shells of marine creatures billions of years ago, then incorporated into rocks, dissolved by rain, absorbed by plants, and eventually finding its way into your diet and into your bones. Every calcium atom in your skeleton has its own journey through Earth's gravitational landscape. Your bones know the feeling of weight in ways that go beyond conscious memory. They remember the satisfaction of bearing load, the purpose of providing structure, the pride of holding you upright against the pull that has defined life on Earth since the beginning. In this weightless moment, your bones don't immediately change their structure, but they begin to sense the absence of their old teacher. The mechanical stress that has guided their growth and maintenance for your entire life has suddenly vanished. They float now within your floating body, still strong, still supportive, but no longer needed to fight the downward pull that has been their constant companion. Your bone marrow, that soft tissue inside your bones where blood cells are made, also feels this change. The fluid dynamics that help circulate blood through the intricate channels within your bones begin to shift as gravity's influence fades. Even your teeth, those specialized bones that have learned to bite and chew against gravitational forces, carry their own memories of pressure and resistance. They remember the satisfaction of tearing into an apple, the work of grinding tough food, the way gravity helps food move through your mouth as you chew and swallow. As you float in this impossible world, your bones rest for perhaps the first time in your life, freed from their ancient duty of holding you upright. They have carried you faithfully through every day, every step, every dance, every stumble. Now they can simply exist, strong and beautiful, without the weight of the world pressing down upon them. But even as your bones rest from their gravitational duties, the rest of your body begins to experience the deeper implications of this weightless existence. What happens when consciousness itself must find new ways to navigate a reality where all the old rules have gently faded away? Something soft and familiar begins to whisper at the edges of your awareness. It starts so gently that you might not notice it at first, like the first breath of dawn breeze before sunrise, or the first notes of a lullaby that your body remembers from long ago. Gravity is coming home. Not suddenly, not with force or urgency, but with the patient tenderness of a mother returning to tuck her child safely into bed. The invisible giant that stepped away to let you experience weightless wonder is slowly, lovingly, resuming its ancient watch over the universe. You feel it first in your heart, that faithful drummer that has learned a new rhythm in weightlessness. As gravity's gentle pull begins to return, your cardiovascular system recognizes its old companion. Blood that has been floating freely through your body starts to remember the familiar patterns of earthbound circulation. Your heart doesn't need to adjust dramatically, but it settles into a rhythm that feels like coming home after a long, beautiful journey. Your breathing deepens slightly as your lungs feel the soft return of gravitational assistance. Air that has been moving in three-dimensional currents around your weightless body begins to flow in the more familiar patterns of up and down. Each breath becomes more grounding, literally and figuratively, as your diaphragm rediscovers its partnership with gravity's downward pull. The floating coffee spheres in your kitchen begin their graceful descent, not falling abruptly but drifting downward like liquid snow, finally reuniting with their cup in a perfect, gentle landing. The coffee doesn't splash or spill. It settles with the satisfaction of water finding its proper place, surface tension and gravity working together once again in their ancient partnership. Dust motes that have been dancing freely through the air start their slow migration back toward surfaces, but not in straight lines. They spiral and drift, following air currents one last time before settling into familiar corners and crevices. Each speck of dust is like a tiny explorer returning from an impossible adventure in the sky. Your tears, those perfect spheres of emotion that have been clinging to your eyes like liquid diamonds, begin their long-awaited journey down your cheeks. But they don't race downward. They roll slowly, gently, as if savoring this return to the familiar ritual of falling. Each tear carries with it the memory of floating, the strange beauty of weightless emotion. Outside your window, the scattered continents begin their majestic return journey. North America drifts slowly back toward its oceanic home, settling into the familiar embrace of the expanding Earth's surface. The floating mountain ranges remember their terrestrial roots, coming to rest in positions both familiar and subtly transformed by their brief freedom. The ocean spheres, those magnificent liquid worlds scattered through space, begin to flow back together. But they don't simply crash into each other. They merge like soap bubbles in reverse, surface tension guiding their reunion into something resembling the seas you've always known, yet somehow more beautiful for having experienced separation and return. Whales that have been swimming through three-dimensional water worlds find themselves once again navigating familiar ocean depths. But they carry with them the memory of swimming around entire liquid planets, of directions that no whale had ever swum before. Their songs echo with new harmonies learned in spherical concert halls of floating seawater. The sun, that expanding star whose nuclear fires had spread like golden petals, begins to gather itself back into its familiar concentrated brilliance. The solar prominences that flowed freely into space curve back toward the stellar surface, creating spectacular arcs of plasma that bridge the space between expansion and return. The sun's light, streaming toward Earth, carries within it the memory of having been more diffuse, more gentle, more like starlight scattered through cosmic gardens. Time itself, which had grown lighter and flowed more purely in the absence of gravitational curvature, begins to resume its familiar patterns. The subtle compressions and stretches that Einstein discovered return gradually to space-time, like wrinkles slowly forming in silk. Your thoughts, which drifted through transformed temporal landscapes, settle back into the rhythm of Earth-time, carrying with them the experience of consciousness in a lighter reality. Your bones, those ancient libraries of gravitational wisdom, feel the return of their old teacher with something like relief and recognition. The calcium crystals in your inner ear settle back into their familiar patterns, restoring your sense of balance and direction. Up and down become meaningful concepts once again, but with a deeper appreciation for their arbitrary nature. The electromagnetic fields that had spread more freely through less curved spacetime begin to follow their accustomed paths around massive objects. Radio waves curve again through gravitational fields. Light from distant stars resumes its ancient curved journey through space, and the constellations drift back toward their familiar positions in the night sky. Your body settles into your bed with a sensation both familiar and new. The weight returning to your limbs feels like a warm blanket being pulled up to your chin, like the comfort of being held after a period of floating free. But this weight carries with it the memory of weightlessness, making you more aware than ever before of gravity's constant, gentle embrace. The air around you settles into familiar patterns of rising and falling, warm and cool currents finding their accustomed flows. The boundary between your body and the atmosphere becomes more distinct again as gravity helps define the edges of things, the surfaces where one substance ends and another begins. Your hair, which floated around your face like underwater seaweed, settles back against your head and shoulders. But it falls with a different quality now, as if each strand remembers its brief freedom to move in all directions, its moment of weightless dance. Plants throughout the world turn their faces back toward the sun with renewed purpose, their stems and leaves rediscovering the meaning of reaching upward against gravitational pull. But their growth carries forward the memory of having experienced light coming from all directions, of having existed briefly in a world without up or down. The planet Earth itself, expanded and transformed by its brief liberation from self-compression, settles into a new equilibrium. Larger than before, changed by the experience, but fundamentally the same ancient world that has held and nurtured life for billions of years. As gravity completes its gentle return, you find yourself held once again by the most faithful force in the universe, the invisible companion that has never truly left your side. But now you know its presence in a way you never did before. You feel its embrace not as a constraint, but as a gift. The gift of weight, of direction, of being held safe in the vast darkness of space. Your eyelids grow heavy with more than sleep. They carry the weight of wonder, the gentle burden of having seen the impossible made real, of having experienced the universe from a perspective that revealed its hidden poetry. You rest now in the arms of gravity and dream, held by forces both seen and unseen, in perfect peace.